Let me bring in Jacinta Prince, who's the incoming CLP Senator for the Northern Territory. She joins me tonight from Devonport in Tasmania. Good to talk to you again, Jacinta. You would have been pleased with that response from Anthony Albanese, presumably?
Yes, I think it's really important that we take a bipartisan approach to unity in this nation. And if you have the privilege of representing your whole state and the Australian people in federal parliament, if you have that privilege, then you should act in good faith in order to be what you're supposed to be, is that representative for the Australian people, and not hold, not be contemptuous before the Australian people. It's downright disrespectful.
As an Indigenous Australian, how do you feel about Adam Bandt basically using Indigenous Australians as an excuse? He says that some Indigenous Australians find the Australian flag hurtful and therefore he won't use it. What about the Indigenous Australians who love the flag?
Exactly. He's not interested in the truth as he purports. He's interested in pushing ideology and division and, in fact, not recognising the truth or respecting the voices of those who do see themselves as being represented by the Australian flag, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. And he and Lydia both have to understand that they have, of course, sworn an allegiance to the Commonwealth, to the Queen, in order to represent all Australians in federal parliament, and not just the radicals, the handful of radicals and themselves.
A couple of other issues I wanted to get your thoughts on. One is the low voter turnout in the Territory, in the seat of Lingiari. Of course, a massive seat, covers most of the Northern Territory. It never gets a super high turnout. I think it's got close to 80% once, but it was down about 2/3 this time around. What has that been put down to, and what needs to be done?
Look, I think the people in remote communities have, for the last 3 decades, been provided with promises and have been let down over and over and over again. I think some of the behaviour on remote polling booths is utterly disgusting. And, in terms of Labor always talking about the need for, for respectful cultural practices and safe cultural spaces and all those sorts of things, a lot of remote Indigenous Australians don't like being treated as though they don't know any better and that they are owned certainly by Labor. These are all the things that you won't hear from Labor. They will push the blame onto, they're now in government, but they will continue to play opposition on this as if they're still in opposition to the Morrison government, the former Morrison government. But the truth is, the tide has turned against them, so they see this as an anomaly. Sorry, this is some sort of anomaly. But what needs to happen is, in my belief, the way I'd have it in remote communities is I'd have none of us present handing out how to votes and shoving them in people's faces and trying to corral them and get them to vote one way or the other. I would provide a space, if I were the AEC, where they could have access to how to vote cards, where they could have the interpreters that they needed to make informed votes, to understand the process correctly, and just allow that space for people to go ahead and make their vote. That's what I would seek to do in remote communities. And I think then you'd see a greater turnout in terms of voters. But I think, Labor are concerned because they've had a swing against them this time around. And in my belief, there are those that said, this time around, I don't want to vote for Labor, so I'm just not going to vote at all. And I think that's what's going on in these communities. And I've always said that people need to be well informed, they need to be educated about their vote, and they need to have the freedom of choice and not feel like they're being pushed into or coerced into a vote and a vote for Labor.
Yeah, there's always speculation and accusation about what goes on at these remote communities at election time, and we get very little visibility on it. So hopefully the AEC is having a good look at it, especially given those turnout numbers. The voting numbers this time around was so low. Thanks for joining us, Jacinta. Talk again soon.
Thanks, Chris.